Anything going on?
Not really. Yeah, not really. No. It's June.
Same old, same old.
It's yeah, just trying to get through this crazy thing called life. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter at RealBirdLawyer. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt. I, I mean, what's up? What's going on?
Chilling, not much. Excited to talk a little ball with you as always. There's really not much going on, but we are still going to have fun because that's what we do on this show.
That's what we do. And we love to talk ball. We also love to promote our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Use our promo code SUNNY, SUNNY, get you a match deposit on your first deposit up to $100. Speaking of fantasy, and I am doing this to force myself to do this in
Pressuring
time
yourself.
for the podcast next week, but I'm putting it on record. I'm going to make an announcement, details about the Always Sunny Fantasy Leagues, plural, on the podcast next week. I've got a pretty good idea of what we're doing. I just need to sit down sometime in the next week and hammer it out and work out the details. And I will announce on the podcast next week. We will announce, this is a collaborative effort. Obviously, you'll be involved. I'll be involved. We'll celebrate us. We'll celebrate you guys. We will announce how you get into those leagues. If you were in our league last year, you're gonna be involved in some capacity if you want to be. But
You are.
we're gonna have some more spots to fill, so we're gonna need to come up with some way to do that. We did a contest in the past to kind of winnow down the applicants. Had a lot
That was
of
fun.
interest a couple of years ago, so we'll do something like that. We'll put our heads together. But stay tuned for that next week. We got a great show for you guys this week, despite the fact that nothing is happening. We've got news. We've got our ass blast from the past, 2003 Chiefs traveling to Baltimore to take on the 2003 Baltimore Ravens, Week 4. Pretty fun, exciting game, actually. We didn't have the whole broadcast for this one, but we did have a nice, hefty YouTube highlight reel, chock full of highlights. We've got a good little breakdown of that game. And then we got some mailbag questions here at the end. We haven't, dived into the mailbag in a while, so we're going to do that.
I want to say also that I know we typically interact with you all, the listeners, the most on Twitter. And then we have invited you all to join us on our Discord server, which I've always said, DM me on Twitter and I can send you an invite. But I would just want to mention also that if you don't like Twitter, you are, maybe you're boycotting Elon Musk or whatever the case may be. But if you are not into Twitter, but you do listen to the show, we do still want to hear from you. And if that's the case, we do have a Gmail account. It's always sunny in chiefskingdom@gmail.com. Please don't sign us up for stupid stuff, but if you would please send in questions or just shout outs or whatever. If you want to reach out to us, but you don't have Twitter and don't know how to use it or don't like it or whatever the case may be, we do still want to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do not blame anybody at all that does not want to be on Twitter. It is just a pit of despair right now. I mean, it is a
That's why I mentioned that, because I've been
downhill
frustrated.
roller coaster into the basement. It's so ridiculous. Like, I'll just be on Twitter. I'll accidentally pop over to For You. And the other day, I was, up in the mountains with my wife and my in-laws and just browsing Twitter. And I accidentally popped over to For You. And it was an AI-generated image of AOC's breasts.
Oh, sure.
Like, this is
sure. That's for you, buddy.
That's for me.
Yeah. The For You page is unbelievably bad. And it makes no sense. It's not. I mean, they're losing their minds over it.
The whole verified thing, we've wanted to be blue checkmark men for a long time, but my goodness, they're just
the shine is rubbed off.
They're out of control. So if you're not on Twitter, that's completely fine. Send us an email. It's always sunnychiefskingdom@gmail.com. Reach out to us. Let's get into the news. So big news on the podcast, maybe, possibly, perhaps. not necessarily unexpected, but maybe a little bit unexpected. DeAndre Hopkins, your guy, a longtime member of your Dynasty League team before you traded him away for peanuts and won a ring without him. Congrats to you.
Yeah.
He is a free agent. The Arizona Cardinals decided that they weren't going to get anything for him, which is a little bit surprising. We'll talk about that. And they decided to just eat all of the money that they owed him. They literally ate his contract, and he's a free agent now. And he can sign with any team that he wants. And obviously, there have been reports, there have been whispers that he could be interested in the Chiefs, and the Chiefs could be interested in him. According to Jeremy Fowler, we did talk about this last week, but they did reach out to him before the draft, and he now is available. Chiefs would have to clear up some cap space. I think the most recent update on this is that it may take a while. Jeremy Fowler reported today that, he is going to be patient. There may be team visits. He'd like to be in before training camp, which still is a long ways away. I guess not that far away, but still 6 or 7
weeks
away.
It's June, buddy.
Sure.
We're getting there.
It's crazy how the time flies. But Jeremy Fowler last year reported is that the Chiefs were kind of neck and neck with the Buffalo Bills. And so I guess as we sit here on June 1st without a whole lot to talk about, let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure. Part of the motivation, the reason that the two teams that are neck and neck are the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills is because both of those teams would be very incentivized to keep DeAndre Hopkins away from the other team. As much as it is that they would want to add a talent like him, they also know that if he goes to the other team, they're in trouble, whoever doesn't get it. I mean, make no mistake. I know that the Chiefs feel comfortable with their roster and they just won the Super Bowl and they're very confident, and they should be. They have the best player on the planet. But they definitely do not want DeAndre Hopkins to land at Buffalo. And vice versa, the Bills, obviously, who are chasing the Chiefs like everybody else, doesn't want the Chiefs to get any better. So there's that aspect of it. There's also, he's 30. And while he's performed very, very well, he's also had the PED suspension last year. And then fortunately for his case, when he came back from the PED in a 9-game season, he still had close to 800 yards. So it's not like he came back from getting dinged from the PEDs and wasn't himself. And you could kind of sit there and wonder like, oh, I wonder if that he's still DeAndre Hopkins, but the money is, I think, the reason that he doesn't have a team right now. And that's that the timing of his release was after the draft. It was after everybody went shopping in free agency, filled up their cap, kind of got their plan for 2023. And then next thing you know, a guy like DeAndre Hopkins is now available on the market, and some teams might have to scramble. And the Chiefs would certainly be one of those teams that would have to scramble.
Yeah. I think at this point, it makes it really comes down to what I don't expect the Chiefs to necessarily get DeAndre Hopkins. I think it's something that they're certainly going to keep their options open, and they're going to talk to him, and they're going to see, if he's going to want to come play at their number. And, if that works out, I'm sure the Chiefs would be all over it. There's really no downside to it if they can make a number work that makes sense for both sides. But I think the motivation here is to keep him from going to a team like Buffalo, where he could impact the Chiefs' chances in a negative way. And there was a little whisper today that he might be interested in going back to the Texans.
Yeah, fine.
So be it. If
absolutely.
he wants to go back to the Houston Texans, or if he wants to go play in the NFC, that's fine. That's obviously the second best outcome after him coming to play in Kansas City for a number that the Chiefs are comfortable with. But we're just going to have to see. It doesn't sound like anything is imminent, and I can't wait to talk about it every week for the next 6 weeks like we did with Odell for a year and a half.
Do you want the Chiefs to sign DeAndre Hopkins?
If the
number makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, because he's DeAndre Hopkins and it's fun and it's sexy. But, we on this podcast have gotten excited about a lot of veteran wide receiver options over the last couple of years.
Julio, Antonio Brown,
sure,
Odell.
It just Josh Gordon.
Gordon, big time.
It rarely works out. And
No.
DeAndre Hopkins obviously has a He has more recent production than a lot of those guys did, but he still is a player in his 30s. So it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. I mean, him going to Buffalo is really probably the only destination that would really concern me
How about
because I
Baltimore?
think I don't.
They're starting to concern me. They're starting to.
Sure, but do they really? I don't know. I mean, they'd have a good wide receiver room, but like,
Do they? Oh, they
is that,
would. They would.
well, sure, they have Odell.
I thought you said they do. Yeah.
Rashad Bateman. They have who's the third guy that they picked up this offseason?
Oh,
they drafted Zay Flowers. So
yes,
I mean,
they did.
they've got some guys. That's certainly more talent than they've had there in the wide receiver room than probably any year with Lamar as their quarterback. But now, if they added DeAndre Hopkins, certainly that would be. I mean, it'd be good. And with Mark Andrews, it'd be great, really great receiving room.
I think the Ravens are going to be a problem without Nook, so I think that him going there would be unfortunate. I think it's really Buffalo and Baltimore that I'm worried about. I don't think, obviously, I mean, Cincinnati couldn't afford, a third of Nook's contract. And
I mean, how much would he really help them? I mean, they already have
too many mouths to feed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, outside of those teams, there's really no one in the AFC that, I mean, he's not going to go to Jacksonville. And who else is there? The Chargers? Yeah, I mean, they've got too many. They've got Quentin Johnston and Keenan and Mike Williams. So
in fact, Travis Kelce pointed this out on the New Heights podcast this week. Is that they've got too many outside big body wide receivers, slow wide receivers already. I mean, contested catch. Let's be charitable. Contested catch wide receivers. We don't want to call them slow wide receivers, but they already have a lot of bigger guys who are good at the catch point and are not fast, which is what DeAndre Hopkins is, especially at this stage of his career. So we'll just see how it plays out. I mean, that's kind of the news. But we do have another item that we need to talk about. Speaking of big-bodied wide receivers who are good at the catch point, the Chiefs are conducting organized team activities right now, as you know. And there's just a steady drip of Justin Ross hype at Chiefs camp. I don't know if we need to get McMullen back on here and ask him about this, because I don't know if it's just something that the social team wants to promote. They put out a clip of him yesterday. I mean, they've been putting out clips of him almost every day. And it's weird because, like, obviously, there are certain players you would expect them to hype. Rashee Rice, obviously FAU, the recent draft picks. This is an undrafted free agent from last year, okay? Obviously a monster talent in college, but it's been, 5 years since he played in the national championship game and, lit up whoever Clemson was playing that year. I can't remember who it was. But I thought the most telling piece of hype was Patrick Mahomes slapping the eyeball emoji on there. I mean, am I wrong about this? Like,
no.
I get it if it's a social media intern that's putting hype out there, especially somebody that's like got the pulse of Chiefs Kingdom. That's like,
yes,
I know what's going to get the clicks, whether they're rage clicks, whether they're excited clicks, whatever it is. I know it's going to be Justin Ross. That's the hook. That's just good social media presence. But Patrick Mahomes, I don't feel like has any ulterior motive, right?
I mean, we know that Mahomes will hype anybody up that's on his team. We know that.
Absolutely.
And so his personality does suggest that if there's a social media clip out there of one of his buddies on the team, that, he's going to show him some love. That's what he's always done. But it's different here. It just feels different. And maybe that's partly because I want it to feel different. But when the team hypes up a player and then the fan base catches the hype and then the team knows that the fan base is hyped about him, so they hype him up more. It's like a feedback loop, right?
Sure,
like that's,
that's
absolutely what you could be seeing from the team aspect of it. But certainly Mahomes was fired up to hit that deep pass to Justin Ross. And certainly Andy Reid saying that Mahomes has a lot of trust in Justin is not something that Andy Reid had to say. While Andy's always positive and is always, gonna say the nice things about guys, he's definitely not just making shit up out there. And I mean, there is a clear connection and trust there between Mahomes and Justin Ross. And Whether that develops and whether we continue to see Justin's career step forward or whether he can't stay healthy. I mean, it's all right in front of him. He could either go out and become one of the best injury comeback stories in NFL history, or he could just be another in a long list of guys that had a lot of potential, just could never quite stay healthy. And, we'll just see how it goes. But I think if you aren't hyped on Justin Ross, you just don't get it. You don't really know his story or understand his physical skill sets, or like just think that he's just some other random guy they picked off the street. That why is everybody hyped about him? Like, no, he's got legitimate bona fide skill, and now it's time to see him put it to work.
Just circling back to DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know if it's because of Justin Ross specifically, but I do get the sense that just based on sort of broadly taking in all of the information that the Chiefs have given us, whether it's their actions, their statements, the things they put out, the things they said in interviews, the clips that they share on social media, I think the Chiefs are pretty confident about this wide receiver room. And I get that they're going to say that regardless. They were saying that last year when we literally had like no wide receivers on the team, right? Like we're confident in the guys that we have. But they have added a lot of talent. I mean, whether it's functional talent, whether they're going to be proven correct about this or not, they took Sky Moore in the second round last year. They traded a third round pick for Kadarius Toney, who was a first round pick 2 years ago. They drafted Rashee Rice in second round this year. So you've got three guys that you've added to the wide receiver room that weren't there a year ago that are, premium talents potentially, right?
And high draft capital in all three of those players. Like they should be premium talents. You spent on those guys.
And on top of that, they have Justin Ross. And it's interesting. It's interesting. I do think that like the number of bodies that they've put into the wide receiver room, they've got a lot of intriguing players that have talent. And I kind of get the feeling that, and I could be proven completely wrong about this, and the Chiefs could be proven completely wrong about this, but the balance of what they're saying to me does suggest that they I don't want to make this comparison because none of the wide receivers in our wide receiver room are Patrick Mahomes. But do you remember when the Chiefs traded away Alex Smith? And everybody was like,
that's great.
Everybody was like, I mean, they're going to struggle without Alex Smith. This guy led the league in passer rating last year, and then we as Chiefs fans who were obviously super plugged into everything that was happening, we watched, Mahomes' first start against Denver.
You and I bought our Mahomes jerseys in April of 2018.
You got the sense that the Chiefs knew something that not everybody else knew.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to come out and say, I mean, Brett Veach then came out, it was revealed later after the fact that he's like texting, NFL people and being like, this guy's the best player I've ever seen. He's going into the Hall of Fame.
Y'all are fucked.
Some guy's asking, should I put him on my breakout players? And like Brett Veach is texting him, be like, you're going to look like an idiot if you don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get a little bit of a similar vibe. And I obviously, again, I don't want to invite that comparison, but I feel like the Chiefs are very confident in the wide receivers that they have. And they could be wrong, but they could be right. And that would be cool.
Yeah, I think that, there's a difference between having one player and maybe one player at the most important position in sports who's that guy. And that gives you one type of confidence. And the other type is this more of like, we'll be fine. And like also, I think Patrick Mahomes gives them a lot of confidence in the wide receivers. Sure. I think they saw what he did last year.
Yeah.
And they realized like, it'd be fun to go get some big name, but like, we don't need him. We don't need DeAndre Hopkins. And I've always, that's been true. They do not need him. He's a luxury. He's a guy that if they could add him would be fun and would help the team, but he's not someone that if they don't get him, they're in big trouble. And that's the confidence that you get from having an MVP quarterback, having a GOAT quarterback, frankly. And the makeup of this wide receiver room, as you just pointed out, is a bunch of guys that are interesting. It's not like they're confident, but they don't have anyone. They're confident and they realize that if if half these guys hit, then they're going to be freaking dominant. I mean, they're going to be one of the greatest teams of all time if half of these 4, 5, 6 wide receivers end up being pretty good. And I mean, that's just the luxury of having Patrick Mahomes. He makes everyone around you better. He makes these guys that might not even stick on another team's roster turn into, like, I think about MVS. And
Sure.
MVS is a guy that won the AFC Championship game for the Chiefs last season. No doubt about it. He was the only healthy wide receiver, and he absolutely cooked the Bengals. And, like, I don't know if he's capable of that on any other roster in the NFL. I don't know if he could have that type of game, even with no one around him, if he doesn't have a play caller like Andy Reid and a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes and all that stuff. So, like, yeah, these wide receivers have every opportunity to be very, very good in this offense. And I do think that the Chiefs are pretty confident that that's going to happen.
Let's ass blast to the pass. 2003, week 4. Chiefs, 3-0, undefeated, traveling to Baltimore to take on the Fighting Kyle Bowlers. Brian Billick, the Baltimore Ravens, Jamal Lewis.
70,000 at M&T Bank Stadium. The Ravens, of course, were 2-1. They were coming off, they just won the Super Bowl a couple years ago in 2000, the 2000 season. So 3 years ago, they're coming off a Super Bowl winning team. And the previous year, they might have been 7-9, but like they're certainly a solid football team, and they play defense. And that's the thing where, especially these Ravens and like the 2003 Chiefs, as we've talked about, have steamrolled so far. They have absolutely blown the doors off these first 3 defenses that they played, because frankly, these guys, I mean, nobody was ready for this type of Chiefs team. They weren't ready to get pushed around by this line and for Priest and all the stuff that they brought with them. But as you and I saw in the highlights for this game, man, these Ravens came to play. They looked a lot like the Chiefs out there on offense. Like they were jumbo package. And again, some of that's just 2003 football, but like they were running it and really looked like they were going to be able to go toe to toe with the Chiefs for all 4 quarters.
The Ravens quarterback in this game was Kyle Bowler, who was their first round pick that year. He was a rookie. They drafted him 19th overall out of Cal. And let me just share some Kyle Bowler facts with you that might reveal why the Ravens lead so heavily on Jamal Lewis and the run game.
Please.
Kyle Bowler in college at Cal played, he had 43 starts or 43 games in college. So I mean he played all 4 years of college.
Full 4 years. Yep.
He threw 1,300 pass attempts in college, which again for the time is frankly a staggering number. Nowadays you could get to 1,400 pass attempts or 1,300 pass attempps in like 2 years,
right,
as a college quarterback probably. Right. But back in the early 2000s, and he actually was a freshman in 1999. So, different millennium. It was tough to do. And even harder to do, even in that crude era of offensive football, was to complete less than 50% of your passes. Kyle Bowler, less than 50%, less than half. Kyle Bowler completed a staggering 47.8% of his passes in college, over 1,300 attempts. Now, he did improve each season. But to be clear, there was nowhere to go but up. His freshman year of college, he threw 259 passes, completed 100. That is a 38.6 completion percentage.
No.
He played in 10 games. He threw 260 passes. The next year, 46.7%. The next year, as a junior, 49.3. And hey, listen, it was an upward trajectory. His senior year, he completed 53.4%.
Regular Drew Brees out there.
That's above 50%. That's like Elway-esque, right?
Yeah.
And, listen, John Elway inspired draft picks like Kyle Bowler for a long time.
Yes.
Like, this guy's big.
Yes.
He's strong. He could throw the ball really far. Can't hit the broadside of a barn, but, it worked for John Elway. This is one of the greatest players of all time. All right, we checked John Elway off the box.
We did. But just to put a bow on Kyle Bowler, for 1,300 pass attempts with the Ravens, he completed 56.9% of his NFL passes.
Oh, look at that. There you go. Who says
45 tutties, 44 picks, 50%, basically.
Sure, So we haven't talked at all. We talked a little bit about the Baltimore offense that they were bringing to the table, which obviously revolved around their big offensive line, the smash mouth football, Jamal Lewis.
Yeah.
But the defense, the Baltimore Ravens, you mentioned obviously the 2000 Super Bowl winning team, which allowed 10.3 points per game.
Yeah.
This Ravens team finished the year sixth in points allowed, 17.6 points per game. So not quite the heady highs of the 2000 Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens.
Right.
But I mean, this team still had Ray Lewis.
Yep.
It had
Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs.
Yeah,
I mean, they were
former future chief Terrell Suggs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Back to the Future. Yeah, I mean, they had elite defense.
Yeah, Dallas Thomas, Chris McAllister, like they were Gary Baxter. These guys balled. They knew exactly what they were doing on defense. That was what they hung their hat on for years in Baltimore, and this game was no different.
So this one, like many of the games that we've seen in the early going, but this one to an even greater degree started off as a really low scoring contest. The Chiefs first get on the board late in the first half with a Morton Anderson 46-yard field goal. Morton Anderson recently celebrated his 62nd birthday. He was 42 years old this season, and he drilled a 46-yarder. And I mean, this was, I think, probably our best example in the 4 games that we've looked at so far of just how different offensive football and offensive philosophy was in 2003, because the Chiefs punted from the 50 4 times in this game, including a couple of times in the first half.
Yeah, they weren't very concerned about going forward on 4th and doing any of that stuff. I think part of it also, when you're in a defensive struggle, and obviously field position plays a much bigger role. I mean, it always plays a big role, but like if the other team's got Kyle Bowler and they're not doing much on offense against your defense, like you feel better about punting. But you're absolutely right that the Chiefs had 4 drives end right at midfield, and they just decided, and these were all 4th and 4 or short. And they just decided, let's just go ahead and punt this ball and see what Kyle Bowler can get up to, because Kyle Bowler's first half, the drives went pick, 4th down, stop, punt, end of half. So like, the Chiefs definitely, the Chiefs started this game out, punt. And that is very unlike Dick Vermeil's Chiefs. We obviously know that they led the NFL in scoring in 2002. They were well on their way to leading the NFL in scoring so far here in 2003, but they just couldn't get it going against the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed led defense, which is very understandable. And they just kind of kept running into a 4th down wall that they couldn't quite break through.
Jamal Lewis, by the way, they did go for it on 4th down from the Kansas City 8 and did not convert it. So Baltimore, Brian Billick, pretty woke for 2003 to go for it on 4th and short at the 8-yard line.
Right. Instead of taking the points.
We've seen in previous weeks that this is not something that coaches in 2003 did with any regularity at all. We have to talk about the just preposterous sequence of events for the Ravens at the end of the first half that
it's so good
resulted in 3 points. But we have, or no, they didn't score. This was
to start the second half is where
to start the second half. Sorry. But the Ravens in the first half made it all the way down to the Kansas City 30. They had a 3rd and 3, and Kyle Bowler takes an 11-yard stack from Gary Stills, and they punt from the Kansas City 41-yard line, a 25-yard punt. And then to come out at the start of the second half, boy, I'm going to let you break this one down, because this is a doozy.
It was fun. So the Ravens start off, it's only 3-0 Chiefs at halftime. The Chiefs had a Morton Anderson field goal, and that was it. They start off and they're plodding along down the field doing their Kyle Bowler stuff. Jamal Lewis takes it for 8 yards on 3rd and 6. They're about midfield. They get to the Chiefs 33 after a Kyle Bowler scramble. And then Chester Taylor, the old backup running back, as Jamal Lewis was taking a breather, takes the ball all the way down to the Chiefs 1 yard line. On 1st and 10 at the 33, he runs for 32 yards. They barely get him out. Now the Ravens have 1st and goal at the 1.
First and goal from the 1 with
this big bruising Jamal Lewis and Ravens
Jonathan
offensive
Ogden,
line. And I mean, they were freaking loaded. So Jamal Lewis up the middle, 1 yard touchdown penalty on tackle Terry Jones for offensive holding, 10 yards, which is always a killer, especially that close. They've got 1st and 11 now at the 11-yard line, and Kyle Bowler throws incomplete, defended by Jerome Woods, almost picked off in the end zone, but it's not. So now it's 2nd and goal at the 11. Jamal Lewis runs for 5 yards. You would expect that. That's a very classic 2nd and goal from the 11 run there.
Sure, right, of course.
And then on 3rd and 6, Kyle Bowler runs for 5 yards, gets tripped, fumbles the ball into the end zone, forward, recovered by tight end Todd Heap of the Ravens for a touchdown. However, Baltimore,
and they're celebrating. I mean,
they're fired up. They're fired up, baby.
They think they just took the lead in the game.
But penalty on Baltimore, illegal shift, 5 yards, no play. So they had 1 touchdown taken away on a hold. They have an illegal shift here on a fumble forward by the quarterback on 3rd and 6 into the end zone. Just a preposterous play to be called back. And then on 3rd and 11, pass incomplete, and they kick a field goal. So a 1st and goal at the 1 turns into a 29-yard field goal and a 3-3 tie. And I mean, that's 2003 football for you, buddy. They need points any way they can get, but the Baltimore Ravens would be kicking themselves after this game at how that drive it.
It's funny because you wonder sometimes, not to play armchair sports psychologist, but you have to wonder what the Chiefs offense was thinking, watching this comedy of errors from the sideline and watching the 2003 Chiefs, which again, we remind you for, the 10th time on this podcast, it's the worst defense of the NFL the previous year.
Yep.
And they stand firm with a little bit of help from the officiating crew. And then the Chiefs come out with their first drive in the second half, and they've solved this Baltimore Ravens defense, seemingly. Priest Holmes comes out and rips off a left tackle run for 14 yards. Johnny Morton on a little end around for 36 yards.
Yep.
So, I mean,
great
50 yards
blocking there by the line on that Morton run.
50 yards in 2 plays.
Sure,
and
bang, bang.
Priest Holmes and Trent Green with a couple of runs up the middle for another 8 yards. And then Jason Dunn, future guest of this podcast, possibly, maybe, rips off a 15-yard catch and run down to the Baltimore 3-yard line. This was one of 5 catches that he had on the year. And one of, how many touchdowns did he finish with?
3. 3 touchdowns.
One of 2 catches that he had this year that did not result in a touchdown.
Right.
This was it.
That was a big one, too. 15 yards on 3rd and 2. Our guy Jason Dunn comes through there.
Huge.
And then obviously, they do their little Priest goes down to the 1, and then Tony, first touchdown of the year. Tony
Gonzalez, 1 yard wide open. Little trickeration play there. And so the Chiefs go up 10-3. Chiefs are feeling good.
They should be feeling good. I mean, they were about to be down 7-3 on the one end, and then instead Baltimore screws it up on the goal line. The Chiefs do not screw it up. They, of course, the moment they get down to the 3-yard line, they get a 2-yard run and then a 1-yard touchdown pass. So they didn't really screw around much there. And then the Chief fence steps it up again. Ryan Sims gets a sack on Kyle Bowler. They force a punt. They get the ball with a 7-point lead, but the Chiefs can't really do anything with it there. And now we get into T Sizzle comes up with a
future past Chief.
Exactly. Playoff hero Terrell Suggs. And then so after the Chiefs punt, then the Ravens get the ball back and they're down at the Kansas City 23-yard line after.
Can I say, by the way, this is the 3rd drive in the second half for the Ravens, and we're in the 4th quarter. I mean, these drives just take they just take a preposterous amount of time. A
lot of running in this game, guys. A lot of running. So Kyle Bowler drops back and he's trying to hit Chester Taylor, but he is intercepted by Dexter McCleon, who would already have his 3rd pick of the season and would get his 4th pick on the last play of this game. So he was having a great year so far in game number 4. Chiefs get the ball back. The Chiefs takes the ball away as they've been doing all season so far in 2003. But the Chiefs can't do anything with that either. They go backwards, actually. Trent Green gets sacked again by Terrell Suggs, or was that? Oh, yeah, that was Terrell Suggs' pass. And then so the Chiefs go backwards, and then Jason Baker punts. And next thing you know, so it's now 4th quarter. It's gut time. I mean, it's a drive that starts with 10 minutes left, ends with 5 minutes left, with Jamal Lewis punching in a 1-yard run after the Ravens actually got down to the 8, and then the 5, and then the 3, and then the 2,
they
and then the
threw
1, and then
one pass, by the way.
as they should have. They figured it out.
Run. Kyle Bowler, incomplete pass with the defensive holding penalty. Run for a touchdown. I mean, literally just they took the ball out of his hands, and rightfully so, and it's 10-10.
I'm glad you said took the ball out of his hands, because there is a player on the Chiefs that all broadcast. We were watching this like 23-minute YouTube highlight reel, which I would certainly suggest going back. It's basically watching the broadcast without anything.
Yeah, and the video quality was surprisingly good.
It was great.
I mean, certainly
especially
better than any
what we watched last week
owned in 2003.
Yeah, exactly. So all they had been talking about all game long was Dante Hall, and was how Dante had his 2 previous games. He had run a kick or punt back for a touchdown, and how in 5 of his previous 8 games going back to last season, Dante had a touchdown return. So he was the talk of the NFL, the human joystick, the X factor. This was peak Dante Hall. This was like Linsanity for Dante Hall. I mean, it was absolutely everybody in the NFL knew what this guy was all about. And so every punt, every kickoff. He had
5 touchdowns in his last 8 games. I mean, return touchdowns.
He was on fire. He was absolutely
on fire. To give you guys some perspective here, the record at the time, it's since been eclipsed by a couple of guys. The record at the time for total return touchdowns in a career was 13.
In a career.
I mean, he was almost halfway there in 9 games. Yeah. So this was, and remember, I'm sure a lot of you guys remember Devin Hester, obviously, but Devin Hester didn't debut until 2006. This is 3 years before Devin Hester. So it would be fair to argue that this streak that Dante Hall was on was the greatest streak of return play that anybody had ever seen
in NFL history. It was
absolutely all that the announcers were talking about. We had Trent Green again, or not Trent Green, but Kevin Harlan again in this game.
Yeah, Kevin Harlan ran across again, going do a little dynamic duo there. And I mean, they would show like a box score of Dante Hall, and they would show his punt return yards, his kick return yards, his rush yards, his receiving yards. So they were all in, right? And up until this point, and the reason that we are belaboring this so heavily is because Dante, while he had gotten a couple opportunities, had called off a punt that he was mad about. He fair caught a couple that he probably would have liked to try and run back. But when he absolutely had to have it after the Baltimore Ravens just tied the game at 10.
I mean, 5.5 minutes left.
5 minutes and 31 seconds to go. You know, this is it. This is gut check time. Wade Ritchie kicks off. This is not their Matt Stover, their kicker, but this is their kickoff specialist. Kicks off 65 yards. And back then, when you kicked from the 30, you had to kick 70 yards for the touchback. But Wade Ritchie, their kickoff specialist, gets it 5 yards short. And of course, Dante Hall. I'm reading the play-by-play wrong. So first from the 30, Dante only goes 12 yards, but there's an offside on the kickoff.
Right.
And actually, I don't think this was on the highlights, because they just showed them lining up and kicking the other one. So they actually have to go back 5 yards from the 25 and have to go 75 yards for a touchback. But Wade Ritchie once again does not get it all the way to the end line. He only goes 72 yards to the 3. And Dante Hall goes 97 the other way in what is definitely the easiest return Dante Hall has ever had in his career. I know it. I've seen every return he's ever had. This one was a 2-cut, just a little left cuts. Or a little right and then a little left. And he was by the kicker. There was great blocking. I mean, the blocking of the special teams on this was out of this world.
It was amazing. It was
he had just a wide open lane. But what more can you say about Dante Hall at this point? He literally wins a football game and has now had 6 returns in his last 9 games and is absolutely the most electric player in the NFL.
It's absolutely crazy because, I mean, I get that football was different in 2003, and we've experienced this. I mean, with Tyreek Hill when he was a returner, a return specialist, as Jalen Ramsey would say.
Yeah,
we saw teams avoid kicking him, and we saw it. You know, with Devin Hester, after Devin Hester had 11 return touchdowns in his first 2 seasons.
Yep.
And he had 8 for the rest of his career.
Right. He got the Barry Bonds treatment.
Sure, he did. And the Ravens could have not kicked Dante Hall. They could have found a way to not do what they did in this game. But instead, they kicked the ball to Dante Hall. And, they didn't even really put up much of a defense to keep him from going the well. I mean, like you said,
not at all.
It was 2 cuts. It was, nobody really laid a hand on him, and
The kicker was the closest guy to tackling him.
I know. And it was so funny to see, obviously, the reaction. You know, he goes down in the end zone. He spikes the ball. You know, everybody's going crazy on the Chiefs offense, special teams unit, you know, coming out. And this proved to be the game winner.
Yeah, he was absolutely electric. And just to wrap up what happened here in the last 5 minutes of the game after the Dante return,
pretty wild.
Scott Fujita comes up with a 0-yard sack on Kyle Buller, so probably just stopped him at the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 9. And so from 4th and 9, down 7 at their own 12-yard line, you can't go for it on 4th and 9 with 4 minutes left, and they had all their timeouts. So with 4 minutes left, the Ravens punt to the Chiefs. Now, this actually was really crazy. So the Chiefs get the ball back with 4 minutes. They just got to take the air out of the ball. They've got a big line. They've got a big running back. Just go win the game. Just go ice the game. Priest for 3 yards, Priest for 1 yard, and on 3rd and 6, a Trent Green incomplete pass to Johnny Morton. So with 2 minutes and 36 seconds left on the clock, the Chiefs have 4th and 6 from their own 25. They got to punt it back to Baltimore. Jason Baker punts for 36 yards, but Hall of Fame safety Ed Reed, who has 30 punt return attempts in his career. He was a prolific punt returner. He had a touchdown in 2005. He knew what he was doing back there, but muffs the ball with 2 minutes to go and you're down 7. Mark Boerichter recovers, and the Chiefs one more time have the ball 1st and 10 with 2:21 left, but the Ravens have all their timeouts. So they run it for -5 with Priest, which he was they were kind of trying to do some weird stuff there. And Ray Lewis blew it up is what he did. And then the Chiefs tried a weird double handoff where Priest Holmes was the one who pitched it to Dante Hall coming around the end. That did not work at all. Ed Reed, who just muffed the punt, sniffed that thing out, stopped Dante for 12-yard loss. The Ravens took another timeout. So actually, from the muffed kick, the Chiefs lost a bunch of yards. Priest Holmes ran forward for 9, and they ended up on 4th and 18 after that muff kick at the 2-minute warning. But it's the 2-minute warning, clock stops, they give the ball back to the Ravens. So the Ravens, you know, against the Chiefs, against a team that, you know, had their struggles on defense, but this year had been playing lights out, had a couple turnovers, had a couple sacks, they were doing their thing. Kyle Buller could have won this game. And he takes over from the 17 immediately. They get to the 32, then the 40, then the 45, then the Chiefs 45 with 44 seconds left. But then he lofts this ball big and deep on 2nd and 9 with 36 seconds left to the goal line. Dexter McLeon comes up with his 2nd pick of the game, his 4th pick of the season. Big free agent acquisition by the Chiefs. Chiefs win the game.
Let's give out our awards, and let's start with the 5-star man.
You're a 5-star man! You're a 5-star man!
I mean, it's got to be. We haven't given any awards to any of the defensive players so far. Oh, we had Bonnie Holiday in week 1. But
we did with his big sack performance.
We've got to give, I feel like, at least some serious props to Dexter McLeon. A 2-interception game, you know, really coming up with the game-sealing interception there. He had 2 big ones in this game, 3 passes defense, even 4 solo tackles and a tackle for loss in this game. Yeah. He filled up the stat sheet. He was huge.
Yeah, he was absolutely huge. He was a big reason why the Chiefs won this game. Turnovers in a low-scoring game. You know, the Chiefs had 3 turnovers here. They had 2 picks by McLeon and the early pick by Greg Wesley. I mean, you win a game 17-10 and your defense took the ball away. And the Ed Reed fumble actually doesn't count here. Jason Dunn on a fumble recovery on offense, but then Mark Boerichter comes up with another special teams turnover. So the Ravens turned the ball over 4 times. Absolutely, Dexter McLeon getting half of those deserves his love there. Great pick for the 5-star man. How do you feel about trash?
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
For me, you know, the offense didn't do much. Trent threw for 159 yards. Priest only ran for 90. I would say 2 catches for 27 yards for Eddie Kennison on 5 targets. Not a great day for your supposed wide receiver 1. Tony had 3 catches for 13 yards, but did have a touchdown. You can't really trash man a guy if you get in the end zone, even though, boy, Tony really just struggling to fill up the stat sheet here so far in 2003. I'm going to go with Eddie Kennison. I think 2 catches for 27 yards and 3 missed targets. Not great.
Yeah, I think I would probably put up Trent Green. Sure. 17 of 28 for 159 yards. He had a touchdown, but he took 3 sacks in this game. he had a couple of near picks, and I mean, he got away with a couple, which against this Baltimore defense is not something that you really expect to see. But I think that's fine. I mean, the passing offense in this game is sort of a general amalgamated trash man. The rushing offense was good as usual. Brees had 22 for 90, so not prolific performance by any means. I mean, the Chiefs only had 265 yards of total offense in this game, which even by the standards of the day was not a whole lot.
Certainly for them.
Exactly, for this high flying offense. So that brings us to the wild card.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who, for those of you who are not familiar with the segment, is somebody who's capable of anything. And we've just been giving it to Dante Hall every week.
It's so hard not to.
Because he's sort of the ultimate wild card. I mean, X Factor and wild card are essentially synonyms.
Yes.
And I mean,
well, look, spoiler alert, but we're not going to be able to give Dante Hall the wild card every week this 2003 season because he doesn't do what he's been doing for the last 3 weeks on here every year, or every week. But until he stops doing it, how can you not? I mean, Dante Hall's got to be your wild card.
And especially with it being, I mean, we could have elevated him. He certainly would have been in the conversation for a 5-star man this week just because he's the game winner.
Yes.
You could make an argument for him this week as the 5-star man, but we gotta show some love to this defense. I mean, listen, I don't know how this season is going to play out, but this defense has been lights out for 4 weeks. So
they got sacks
all the way.
They got sacks by 6 defensive players in this game. 6 separate guys got one. Scott Fujita, Ryan Sims, Gary Stills, Kelly Gregg, Ed Reed, and Terrell. Oh, sorry. And Kelly Gregg, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs are Ravens. So there were 3 Chiefs that picked up sacks: Scott Fujita, Ryan Sims, and Gary Stills. But they just were flying around. The heat.
I mean, 3 sacks, 3 interceptions is.
And when you play a team like these Baltimore Ravens that don't have a good quarterback, you need to come out as a defense, and you need to say, all right, you have a shitty quarterback. We are going to make you remember that, and we're going to pick him off 3 times, and we're not going to let you move the ball. And I mean, if you're going to go out and win a championship, this is the type of team that you need to have a good defensive performance against, and that's exactly what the Chiefs did.
Chiefs are 4-0. Tune in next week to see how the 2003 Chiefs get on. Just friends across the pond say.
Just to tease that, next week is a big one. Next week is the Arrowhead Broncos at Chiefs game.
Oh, I can't wait. It's
the 4-0 Broncos.
4-0 against 4-0, 2 undefeated teams, a clash of the Titans. Can't wait to see how it turns out. It's going to be great. Let's answer some questions from the mailbag. We have not done this in a little while. It's June 1st. We've got some time on our hands. We've got one here from our guy, Mr. J1128. Congrats on the new baby.
Yes, mazel tov.
Listening to New Heights, is it legal for a current player to be a minority owner of an NFL team? If Mahomes buys ownership of a team other than the Chiefs, who is he buying? So to answer the legal question, and this has come up recently in the context of Tom Brady, who is trying to become a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, it has to be approved by, or for a player, for anybody, but 24 owners essentially have to sign off on this. So in the context of the Tom Brady thing, I mean, do you think 8 teams, do you think 9 teams would veto that if he tried to come back and play quarterback for the Raiders?
It would be certainly 9 AFC teams if there were. I mean, if you were going to get a coalition of teams together,
definitely the 3 AFC West teams.
Certainly the 3 AFC West teams, and really, I do believe that every AFC team would look at Tom Brady trying to join
every team with the Raiders on schedule, right? And I guess if you're a team with playoff aspirations, you could bump into them in the playoffs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't think. But the other thing is,
do you think though that the owners are motivated by that? Or by money?
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Tom Brady being back in the league
is a moneymaker.
Yes, it is.
It's a moneymaker. It is. I certainly think that the 3 AFC West teams would vote against it, just out of principle. You just can't let your division rival pick up Tom Brady. You just can't.
Do you think Tom Brady, as a Las Vegas Raider, as a 46-year-old Las Vegas Raider, is beating the Chiefs? He's not.
I don't, but I do feel like enough people would be uncomfortable with that idea. The whole idea is extremely the implication. Yeah.
Yes. No, I completely agree with that. If Mahomes buys ownership of a team other than the Chiefs, who's he buying? I mean, I feel like he owns so many teams already that
He certainly owns the Broncos.
if he's going to buy a team, it's got to be a team that he doesn't own
The Cowboys.
already.
It's got to be the Cowboys.
Sure. Okay. The Cowboys for you. I'm going to say the Minnesota Vikings because that's actually the only team besides the Chiefs that he is not defeated. So
that's good.
Listen, if you can't own them on the field,
own them
off
beat them, own them.
I don't know
if you can't
who
beat
owns
them,
the Vikings off the field, but he can't have that much more money than Patrick Mahomes. So
I believe that he grew up a Cowboys fan.
I'm sure he did. I'm certain.
In Tyler, Texas, and sure. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing either like a video of him wearing a Cowboys gear as a kid or something. I'd have to look it up. I
mean, growing up in Texas in the 90s.
Yeah, how could you not be a Cowboys fan? Right. But, I mean, that would be a pretty clear, they're an NFC team, so they would be, I think it would be a great partnership with the Cowboys. I think they would love the publicity of having I'm thinking like real world. Like if he actually did buy a team, I don't think any of those AFC teams would want him as partial owner.
No, it makes sense. You're right. It makes sense. The Cowboys would make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I'm not really sure. This is an aside, but why the Raiders for Tom Brady? Is it just because Mark Davis is poor and he needs somebody to help
his
support his
relationship with McDaniels?
I guess, but is McDaniels going to be there?
That's good. That's good.
Maybe Tom's just buying a piece of the team to keep his buddy employed. That would be very magnanimous, especially after he lost all that money in that Ponzi scheme. Yes. I don't know. I mean, he's got a lot of money to throw around, but still, he was rumored stake in a football team is a lot of cash.
They kind of went after him to play for a while.
They did.
So I do think that behind the scenes, he probably has some pretty good relationships with that organization. It seems like. So yeah, I think he just wanted to keep his name in the NFL. And I mean, if he comes back, that is going to be exhausting as fuck.
It is. No, it is. Did you see, speaking of former Raiders that are trying to make a comeback, this is not a responsibility question, but did you see that the Saints are bringing in John Gruden to talk to Derek Carr?
I did. I love that they pick up their big free agent
quarterback.
And the first thought is, how can we make this guy good? Because he's not good already.
Yeah,
what can we possibly do?
Who can we call? We could call that racist ogre John Gruden who got booted out of the NFL. I think there's a possibility that we see John Gruden as the coach of the Raiders again.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe coaching Tom Brady and maybe this year. I'm hoping not, but if you want exhausting, boy. We've got several questions here from Casey Sortorican. Come on! The Chiefs had a ton of rookies play large roles in winning a Super Bowl last year. Is there any concern that having a lot of rookies have early success could make them think that success is easier than it really is? Could that make some of these rookies less locked in and doing things the right way? I presume Andy Reid will ensure that this isn't the case, but I am curious about it. This is a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think being curious about it is fair, for sure, just based on how we know humans work. It's really not specific to the NFL necessarily or these rookies. It's more just about young success in general, in anything you do. And does having a lot of success early on, does it, I don't want to say taint the way that your work ethic goes, but how much does it impact your work ethic moving forward? And I think there are certainly different ways to handle that. And you would have some guys in some sports, and certainly, on the Chiefs, that might relax a little bit with some early success. And then I think you have most of the other guys that it might drive them to be a little bit. Maybe you see some of these guys that when they started off and they won a ring and they think that was so much fun. I never want to have a season that doesn't end like that. That was the only way to play football. And it could elevate some of those guys even further. So there's a spectrum for sure. I think given the way that the Chiefs just are operating and their coaching staff and their veterans on the roster and all that, I think they're a culture that would really, really, keep these rookies on the right path. But I do think that if there were other NFL locker rooms that might have had some early success and had a bunch of rookies involved in there, yeah, you could have seen that maybe snowball into kind of a big type of big mess, but not the Chiefs.
I think it's an interesting question and a fair question because, I mean, when I read this, the first thing that I thought of was not specifically rookies, but think about the 2019 Super Bowl winning Chiefs. They brought in Frank Clark, they brought in Tyrann Mathieu, and they remade the defense. And what those two guys brought, at least early on, was attitude and edge, right? Like they got rid of Eric Berry, they got rid of Tom Bahali, they got rid of Justin Houston, they got rid of Derek Johnson. They really cleaned house from all these Chiefs legends of the past that, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying this is actually the case, but the perception was that some of these players had maybe gotten a little bit complacent. They weren't the leadership that our team wanted to have in place on the defensive side of the ball. Now, after the Chiefs won that Super Bowl, some of that edge was lost. I'm not saying that.
I agree.
And to be fair, Frank Clark got it back, right? Like Frank Clark had that edge back this year. Tyrann Mathieu, I feel like it was sort of a steady downhill slope with the edge, kind of coming off the field and maybe on the Twitter a little bit. But I think it's a fair question to ask because I think it's easy to just say, oh, Andy Reid will handle that. These guys are going to always work hard. I think that's true generally, but like, let's not act like this team hasn't gone through a few different periods with Andy Reid as their coach. I would say one, kind of 2017, 2018, where that defense was really slipping. The last couple of Bob Sutton years, but really even the last, the Tyrann Frank Clark era, where Anthony Hitchens, Tyrann Mathieu, some of those guys really did not have the edge after winning the ring and then losing the Super Bowl the following year. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys respond. I think that teams are always trying to obviously bring in high character guys that are going to want to win. And I think the Chiefs this is completely circumstantial, but I think the Chiefs have been getting better at that. Like, I think when you look at the players that Brett Veach brought in kind of his first spending spree, look at the two players that he spent on in his first year as GM. It was Sammy Watkins and it was Anthony Hitchens. I don't think either of those guys are guys that you would consider to be, high attitude, leadership players, right?
I agree.
They're not leaders in the locker room. They deliberately went out then the year after that and got Frank Clark and Tyrann Mathieu, and that worked for a time. I think they are sort of building up to this sustainable culture, and it obviously helps when you have the best quarterback in the world and he's also the best leader, and you have now unequivocally one of the best coaches of all time running the team. So we'll see how it goes, but I certainly am cautiously optimistic that the guys will be locked in and ready to go. Another one from KC Puerto Rican: does Chris Jones get to being second all time in Chiefs sacks? So second in franchise history. I guess first, where is he now? What does he have to do to get there?
Right now, Chris is 24 and a half regular season sacks behind Tom Bahali for second place. In his career, Chris has gone 15 and a half sacks, 9 sacks, 7 and a half sacks, 9 sacks, 15 and a half. It's a palindrome, which is an average of about 13 a season. So if he kept up that average, that'd be 2 more seasons at that pace to get to 26. He's 24 and a half short. He could even go slightly below that pace, obviously, and still get there. I think 2 more seasons at his average career production in a Chiefs uniform is not too much to ask. I don't think that's necessarily going out on a limb to say that he'll get there. We're asking this right in the middle of a really important time in Chris Jones's ability to do this, which is the season that we are all hoping that he gets a contract extension from. And if he doesn't get it, and if the Chiefs, blow it with him or plan on moving on or whatever the case may be, but if he doesn't have any, if this is his last year, he's obviously not getting 24 and a half sacks this year. But I do think that just given the back and forth between him and the team, and he wants to retire a Chief and all the love that seems to go on between the Chiefs and Chris Jones, I just don't see him not picking up 25 more sacks as a member of the Chiefs. I think he gets it done.
I think he does too. And obviously this really is a question of, is he going to be extended or not? Now, even if even if he doesn't get an extension, the Chiefs could potentially tag him, and there would be a potential way for him to play 1 or 2 more seasons on the tag. I don't think the Chiefs would want to go that route with Chris Jones. Obviously, they've started down that path with him before.
It didn't go
wasn't great for either the player or the team.
Mm-mm.
And, I think, I mean, it's easy to forget this, but I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we had serious doubts about whether Chris Jones was going to be in the Chiefs uniform and whether he was going to get the last contract that he got.
Certainly.
Because, that contract negotiation up until it happened, a couple weeks after Patrick Mahomes signed his deal, it wasn't obvious that was going to happen. And obviously we're all glad that it did and it worked out, but we'll just kind of see how this negotiation progresses. But I think certainly if he's here 3 more seasons, he definitely will get it. Like, I don't think there's any chance that he's under 24.5 sacks if he gets 3 more seasons.
Yeah, it'd be 8 years at under 8. I mean, sorry, 3 years at under 8 a season just does not seem like.
Yeah, no, I mean, there'd have to be some really serious injuries in there, which obviously we hope don't happen, knock on wood. But I think 2 more seasons, he probably gets it. I mean, again, that's just slightly below his career average, and he's trending. Now, this is a palindrome, so I guess it could be 9, 7.5, and 9 again. That would be the pattern. So,
because 9 and 7.5 is only 16.5, that would not get him there.
That would not get him there. So, I mean, the Chiefs need to be aware of this when they go to the negotiating table. Is that he has performed as a palindromic player?
Palindromic.
We need to incorporate that into his next contract, because obviously that is predictive of what he's going to do going forward.
Book Chris Jones for 9 sacks next year.
Yeah, book it. Sure, exactly. Probably can get good odds on that at Vegas, as a prop. Casey Sorterican again. So remove the best quarterback from each AFC division. Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lawrence, which is unequivocally correct.
Yep.
Does the AFC still have a better top 4 division quarterbacks than the NFC, essentially making the NFC 3rd string, 1 quarterback per division? So we're taking the best quarterback away from each division in the AFC. We're essentially taking the 2nd best quarterback in each division in the AFC and comparing them to the 1st string in the NFC. So the top
Correct.
4 division quarterbacks in the NFC.
Before
so first, I guess,
we judge, let's establish best quarterbacks in each NFC division, just to start off. In the NFC West, we kind of have Kyler Murray if you count him as the Arizona number 1 string quarterback. I guess you would. He's hurt, but he's still the guy. Or we have Geno Smith,
Stafford,
or we have Matt Stafford, or we have whatever's going on in San Francisco.
Trey Lance.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a tough one because none of these
they're
guys
all
are that
kind of
good.
I would say you probably would go with Matt Stafford there based on history and career and all that stuff. And I mean, really, there's really, it doesn't matter because he's going to lose to the AFC West.
Yeah, you could make arguments for. I think you could make an argument for Geno. I think you could make an argument for Kyler. I mean, really, those. But
you're not really moving any. You're not making.
No,
they're all about the same.
Yeah, right. And really, like, if you were just picking one for 2023, I would pick Geno because I'm not confident that Kyler will play at all, and I'm not confident that Matt Stafford will play well. So I mean, whoever, it's one of those 3 guys. And
NFC North, you've got obviously the new heir apparent Jordan Love in Green Bay. You've got Jared Goff, former 1-1 overall pick.
Sure.
Which, you've got Justin Fields, who's been up and down, but certainly has had some flashes.
You were very high on him in your power.
I was very high on him, but I wasn't as high on him as I was on this 4th player, Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is the answer in the NFC North.
I agree that it's Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
So off to a bad start for the NFC.
Yeah, sure. I mean, not fantastic.
This is not trending in a good direction for them, but let's move to the NFC South.
Yeah, and this one is even worse. You've got Desmond Ritter in the exactly. You've got Ritter in Atlanta. You've got Bryce Young in Carolina, obviously. Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask or whoever in Tampa Bay. And then New Orleans is Derek Carr. Derek Carr might be the answer here.
Yeah, you probably have to give it to Derek Carr.
Even though Bryce Young is probably a better quarterback than Derek Carr, I think when I'm comparing these, I'm going to use Derek Carr.
Sure, Derek Carr. Derek Carr seems fine. So,
and then the East is Dak, but you've also got Daniel Jones. You've also got
you got
Sam
Jalen Hurts.
Howell, and and Jalen Hurts. It's Jalen Hurts. It's Jalen Hurts over Dak.
It's Jalen Hurts over Dak.
Sure.
But
Hurts. Yeah.
The NFC East is going to suffer from having. I mean, this is the only division so far where
it's competitive.
You've even had 2 good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
In the division, right?
Yes, in the division. It's in their own division. Yeah.
Right.
So we've got, let's say Geno in the West,
sure.
Kirk Cousins in the North, Derek Carr in the South, and Jalen Hurts.
Okay.
They are going up head to head against in the East, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So not a good start there.
No.
In the West, Justin Herbert.
Yep.
And I mean, yikes. That's
he
clears easily.
Pretty much already over, but we should go through the rest of the exercise.
In the AFC North, you've got Lamar Jackson. Pretty fucking good himself.
Yes,
and then in the South, you've got probably Anthony Richardson. You would also have Ryan Tannehill, or I mean, I guess if
CJ Stroud, sure.
I guess if CJ Stroud wins out there, I mean, who knows what's going on in the AFC South after
really matter who
Trevor
you pick
Lawrence.
Because you could pick any of those guys, and the AFC would still be the clear winner.
Clear. I mean, Rodgers and Lamar by themselves, without even Herbert,
right.
are clear. And Herbert's
pick any 2. I'm not sure that you could. I think you could pick any 2 of Rodgers, Jackson, and Herbert, and then pick the 4th-string guy in each division, and the AFC would probably still win. I mean,
Yes, I agree. It is. I mean, the quarterbacks are so loaded. They're great question, Puerto Rican, and then of course Jason did follow up with that from our Discord and did say if that is the case, repeat the process and see if the 3rd best quarterback in each AFC division is better than the NFC.
Again, our NFC divisions are we're going to go with Geno,
I think
Geno, Carr,
Cousins.
And
Jalen Hurts. Yeah. And so they're going to go up against in the East. If you, it's either between Tua or Mac Jones. Tua. Yeah. In the South, you've got whoever it doesn't really matter. Let's say we pick Tannehill as the 2nd one. So then the 3rd one would either be CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson.
We like
we do. We like him a lot. And then in the West, you've got Russell Wilson.
I guess it's Russell Wilson. We don't know who the rated quarterback is. It's going to be Tom Brady if he comes back.
Tom Brady, probably Tom Brady, but we'll go with Russ there.
Sure.
And then in the what division are we missing? The North.
And it's
Watson. And it's Deshaun Watson. Yes. So Tua, Deshaun, I guess Russ, and Anthony Richardson.
I mean,
versus Cousins, Hurts, Geno, and Carr.
Yeah,
it's pretty freaking close.
It's
Hurts
close.
Clears the other guys. Obviously.
Yes, he does, and I think
outside of him,
Hurts puts them over the top. I mean, if Jalen Hurts didn't exist in this exercise, I mean, and I guess if you put Dak in there, like Dak would clear all those guys in the.
But
AFC
it's not
also.
as close. Dak threw a shitload of picks last year.
Sure, I know. I mean, it is still close. It's not a slam dunk. And honestly, if Deshaun Watson is good,
and if Richardson's as good as we think he could,
sure, right? I mean, if Deshaun Watson had a 2019 Deshaun Watson season, then the AFC would. I think,
Russ won a fucking Super Bowl.
If Russ wasn't a total dog turd. Yes, it's a very close exercise, which it just sad. It's sad for the NFC, definitely. One more from this tag team with Casey Puerto Rican and Jason to close us out. When all is said and done, asks Casey Puerto Rican, who has more wide receiver yards for Kansas City as a 2nd-round pick, Sky Moore or McCole Hardman?
Well, first, let me give you what McCole did as a Chief.
Yes,
in 57 games, he caught 151 catches for 2,088 yards and 16 touchdowns receiving, added another 2 rushing touchdowns, and 1 kick return touchdown. Those are all regular season numbers. Obviously, McCole had a couple playoff flashes here and there, but in general, that was a 4-year career that he put up those numbers. So that's about 500 yards a year for 4 years, and then that's it. And so if you're saying, is Sky Moore going to get to a second contract with the Chiefs because McCole didn't? That's going to be the number one factor here is how many
Sure.
games do each guys play. More yards could also be interpreted, if we're going to be a little pedantic here, as kick return yards and punt return yards. And I mean, they're both receiving guys. As Jason follows up and said, to piggyback off that good question, who ends as the better return man, which is the bigger impact player in Kansas City? So we have to look at the full picture. We don't just look at their receiving yards. We look at what they did in special teams. McCole did have 62 punt returns for 500 yards and 1 touchdown. He did have 39 kick returns for 927 yards and a touchdown. So certainly put in his time all 4 years on the return game. I think that's a tough bar for any incoming player, regardless of pedigree, to say that they'll easily clear. I mean, that McCole, for all the, he missed half a season, but that was it. He played the other full seasons for his first 3 years and then another half season. I think it's going to be close. I think Sky, if he doesn't get a second contract, probably means that he wasn't impressing enough to where he got much over these numbers anyway. And if he does get a second contract, it's probably because he blows these numbers out of the water, right? I agree.
I
just don't know. I don't really see Sky. I don't know. I guess I'm convincing myself that I'm not a huge Sky Moore optimist. Doesn't mean that I don't think it'll happen, but if the season 1 was any indication, which it might not be, I don't think he gets there. I'm going to say no.
I think it's an interesting question. If it's just
very much so,
Casey Puerto Rican's question, more wide receiver yards as a second round pick. I agree that, unless he essentially, I mean, they didn't give McCole a second contract. So unless he meets or exceeds McCole's performance in the first 4 seasons, he probably isn't going to get a second contract. But, Jason's question, which is the bigger impact player in Kansas City? I mean, Sky Moore did have a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and poor McCole Hardman in his first Super Bowl as a rookie against San Francisco, he had 1 catch for 2 yards, and he obviously didn't get a play last year because he, gave us a gutty performance with an injured abdomen against Cincinnati, and he had 2 catches for 10 yards, and he had a couple of rushes for 7 yards in that game, but he got hurt, and he didn't play in the Super Bowl, and so Sky Moore has already exceeded McCole Hardman's contributions in the Super Bowl, and they have the same number of Super Bowl. Well, I guess technically McCole has 2 because even though he didn't play in the game, he'll get a Super Bowl rank.
He's part of the
team. The point is, Sky Moore has already been a greater, arguably, postseason hero than McCole Hardman. They have the same number of postseason touchdowns. McCole had 1 in 10 games. Sky Moore had 1 in 3 games. So, it's an interesting question. I think, gun to my head, you probably, and the other thing too is people sort of perceive McCole Hardman as a bust, and I think in some ways you can argue that, right? Especially when you look at the other guys that were drafted in that wide receiver class, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, but 2,000 yards from your second round receiver over 4 seasons is probably above average production. I mean, you've got to take into account players that bust entirely, and that's reasonable production. And obviously, Sky Moore was well below that in his first season. I do think that Sky Moore has better upside, just because I think he has the potential to be a more polished wide receiver than McCole Hardman. But on the other hand, he doesn't have that elite single trait that McCole Hardman had, which was the top end speed. So. Gosh, it's tough. I'm going to hedge. I'm going to say under on the yards, over on the impact. Over on the impact. Whether that just means a bigger postseason impact, which he's obviously well on his way towards already. So I'll say under on the yards, over on the impact. It's almost any cheese kingdom.